It's Wednesday, and guess what? We are just days away from perhaps the pivotal game in all of the NFL season for the Detroit Lions. Yes, every week, the last few weeks have been big games, but this one really is perhaps the biggest the Lions will face all season long. A win here Saturday against the Carolina Panthers, and you can bet your Christmas presents on this. The Detroit Lions are going to the playoffs. So let's dive into that. Let's dive into some other information affecting the team this week, and perhaps just a little bit more in today's Wednesday version of Lions Talk Live. Well, greetings and salutations, everybody out there in YouTube land. I'm your host, once again, Dan Thornton. This is the Wednesday version of Lions Talk Live. And if you're like, I would say, 99% of Lions Nation, you are jumping in your seats on this big turnaround of the season. Yes, we're back to 500 at 7-7. Yes, we're going on the road into much worse winter conditions than what we saw in the New York Jets against the New York Jets last weekend. Weather predictions have it anywhere from 25 to 29 degrees, a little bit of a wind chill factor kick in, and a little bit more winds. Yes, that is going to affect both teams' ability to move the ball through the air, and yes, that might actually benefit Detroit because, as we probably all know if you're watching this, Carolina Panthers have not had a stout offense throughout the year. Ben Johnson, we trust in, and Ben Johnson's going to have to come up with a way like he has throughout the season to free up receivers in less than ideal weather conditions and help Jared Goff continue his push for quite possibly a Pro Bowl berth. Let's talk about all that right now. Real quick, though, before we talk about that, if you haven't yet subscribed to Lions Talk Live and you're enjoying the content, please consider leaving a thumbs up, maybe even subscribing to the channel, and leave some interactive comments in the sections below. If you would be willing to do that, it would help the channel out exponentially. It's my hope that by Christmas, my Christmas wish for a present is that we'll have 650 subscribers by Christmas morning. So you don't have to go out and buy me any presents. You don't have to go out and send anything on Amazon or other places. Just go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet done so and leave a thumbs up. Now, let's get into the rest of the video. The Carolina Panthers come in with one of the, I guess you say most average offenses in the NFL. Yes, they can run it. Yes, they've got an okay passing game, but they don't really have studs anywhere. The Lions should be able to get some pressure as the Panthers' O-line has given up quite a bit of sacks. Just last week, I get it's Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh was in his face early and often as Donald did not look great, and the Steelers pulled off a big upset, really impacting the Carolina Panthers' ability to make a postseason run. What has aided Carolina in remaining in the playoff picture is quite simply this. Like Detroit, if they win out the rest of the year, they're in the playoffs. Like Detroit, though, they're going to have a must-win circumstance here this weekend, and both teams, in my opinion, are aware of it. You're going to have both teams probably coming out playing a little tight. The thing that is going to aid Detroit is they've been in this situation for a few weeks and have had success playing under duress and pressure, where Carolina has not. Real quickly, let's talk about the defense. While we might not be Blitzburg like Pittsburgh, the Lions' pass rush has become a thing of note. Think about all the different guys who are getting to the quarterback on a regular basis. Aiden Hutchinson, while he didn't get any sacks last week, proved to be quite stout in the run game, and he did get a number of pressures/hits on the Jets quarterback last week, Zach Wilson. He wasn't alone. I'm sure if you watched the game, you're very aware. Romeo Okwara got there for 2. Kaminsky got there. Houston got there. And a number of these guys and others, even though they didn't always get to the quarterback, we did get 11 pressures and I think it was 10 hits on the quarterback last week. So the Lions were getting there quite often. It is a credit to Zach Wilson. While I get he's a much maligned quarterback, he also did what he could to keep drives alive, improvising here and there, and making some plays Mike White simply physically cannot make. He doesn't have the mobility. So say what you want about Zach Wilson. He was part of the reason the Jets were in that game. One of the things we can say, and we have said, is Detroit's offense is apparently able to move the ball and score points on virtually anybody. Say what you want about last week's game that, yes, we only scored 20 points. Yes, it is true. 7 points came from a punt return. By the way, Khalif Raymond, Special Teams Player of the Week, yet another Lion who's earned some form of accolades based on their performances throughout the season. We've had tons of defensive ones, special teams ones, offensive player ones. The awards keep building. But getting back to the game, let's talk about that Jets game. Yes, it is true the Jets have one of the best defenses in all the league, one of their best secondaries in all the league as well. You could even argue the Jets have the best secondary in all the NFL. With that being said, Detroit still had their opportunities to go on and score. Yes, we're all aware that Jared Goff underthrew a pass to Jameson Williams that was probably a yard or so behind him, but we also had opportunities to score touchdowns on running plays that were called back from holding. We had a couple other opportunities through the game to get down and score. Unfortunately, we had to settle for field goals. So while the Lions offense wasn't perfect by any means last weekend, we really didn't play that badly. One clue I will talk about for tomorrow's prediction video that I'm going to dive into a little bit more is our secondary. It is an area of concern for me right now just because simply this. Minnesota had, Kirk Cousins lit us up for 400 yards passing. Last week, Zach Wilson had over 300 yards. I get against Minnesota, we were very thin in the secondary because Jeff Okudah was out the majority of the game because of illness. He had a few injuries that emerged, etc. It is what it is, though. The trend is your friend, and you've heard me say that before. No matter what world you work in, you always go with the trend. And here's what I'd say. The Lions secondary has played great for the majority of the last 2 months. But they are starting to give up some plays here and there more and more. Zach Wilson, you heard me talk about it earlier today, made some very key plays for the Jets last weekend, in part because of his mobility. That's something I don't think we'll see that much of this weekend, but I will say this. The Lions secondary is going to be, in my opinion, the reason we either do or don't finish out the last 3 games and make it to the postseason. They're going to have to find a way in this game, particularly on the road, in a hostile environment with a team that wants to get to the playoffs, and find a way to come up with some plays to make sure the Carolina Panthers don't all of a sudden start scoring points. Real quick, I know everybody, while we're paying attention to where we're going as far as the playoffs, the playoff push, all that stuff, let's not also forget about the draft. I'm sure most of you were probably at least somewhat interested in the Monday night game between the Rams and the Packers. I'm sure you were all cheering when you found out the Packers won, whether you stayed up to watch it or just found out the next morning. But that is also going to set up a huge game for Detroit also this weekend, as we find out that Denver is going to play the Rams in L.A. A win by Denver would be huge for Detroit. And somebody's going to have to confirm this, but I'm showing on my stat board, if Denver wins and the Rams lose, we actually move up Detroit to the number 3 pick. So think about that. Your Christmas Eve present could be the Lions win the game and are actually in the playoffs. Your Christmas night present could be simply that the Lions are now also in control of the number 3 overall pick. And yes, I get there'd still be 2 weeks to go in the season, but hey, take what you can get when you can get it. A heck of a week for Detroit it could be, and a ton of Christmas cheer throughout all the land for Lions Nation. So as you probably all know, Thursdays are my prediction videos, so I'm not going to go too deep dive into this weekend's contest, but I did want to point out a couple of things. Think back, think about Lions draft picks. Think about, and we've talked about on Lions Talk Live for some time, the amount of contributors we're getting from last year and definitely this year's draft class. Here's my expectations going into this game, that you're going to see the coaching staff continue to rely more and more on these draft picks. Romeo Okwara, it's my hope, is going to get a few more snaps. James Houston, I love the fact last week they knocked him up a few more snaps. He did play a little bit more on second downs, not a ton, but they're starting to sprinkle him in there more and more. That's an indication to me that this coaching staff clearly sees this guy developing and they want to find more ways to get him on the field. In order to do that, though, he is going to have to make a play and impactful plays against other teams' running plays, something that is not his strength currently. And I will say this, if there's an NFL tackle out there facing Houston right now, they've got to be deathly aware of what I would call his ghost move, his ghost rush, where he almost does like a scissor cut in the air and then spins. He just doesn't seem blockable on it. Watching the film and the replay from last weekend's game, I'll say this, he used it twice. He destroyed the offensive tackles both times. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's video. Not a ton of big news today. You got some injury reports out. There wasn't really, in my opinion, anything shaking or shattering about it. Dan Campbell, if you've been paying attention, is rocketing up the potential Coach of the Year nominations, and why shouldn't he? His team went from 3 wins last year to 7 wins this year, and it could be argued he could get 1 or 2 or maybe 3 more this year. I will say this, though. I think this is as big a game and moment that Campbell and staff will see. Yes, you could say that for last week and the week before that, but like we've talked about many times on Lions Talk Live, that's part of winning. The more you win, the bigger the pressure builds, because it's just going to keep building upon itself. It will be a credit to his staff and this team, which really does seem to be a united unit that's enjoying playing for each other. If they can pull off this win here this weekend, which I do believe they can, then this team really is going to make it to the playoffs. And I'll say this, I don't care if it's Minnesota or the 49ers we face first. I think both those teams are in real trouble. Detroit could be looking at their first playoff win in 3 decades. So, anyways, if you haven't yet subscribed to Lions Talk Live, please consider doing so. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. And I'll see you tomorrow on Prediction Thursday. Lions Talk Live.